Well, good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you all here tonight at the Lanesborough Health Club and Spa. A big thank you for joining us on a very hot and sticky evening, but I'm delighted that the aircon is on full blast tonight, so that will keep us nice and cool. I've seen already a few familiar faces in the audience, but for anyone I've not met, I'm Francesca Oakeyman-White, and I'm the founder of the Beauty Triangle. So tonight we're discussing the science of skin. After all of us want good skin, but when we dig a little deeper, what does that actually mean? Now, for some of us, it might be about restoring the face that we remember from our youth. For others, it might be about supercharging radiance or hydration, or maybe banishing pigmentation or breakouts. Some of us simply don't want to feel invisible anymore. Now, when we launched the Beauty Triangle, it was to educate and empower our audiences on all aspects of their health and well-being, and always with that all-important holistic standpoint, which is why you'll always find 3 speakers on our panels, each of whom is an absolute authority in their given area of specialism. But we also set up the Beauty Triangle to have the conversations that nobody else was having, destigmatize some of those more taboo subjects in the world of well-being, and ultimately connect you as consumers with some of the most expert, authoritative voices in the world of wellness. On that note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's brilliant panelists. We're joined by former surgeon and global thought leader, Ms. Jonquille Chantrey. We're also joined by regenerative expert and the Lanesborough's resident doctor, Dr. Kaywaan Khan, and finally, Professor of Psychology and Ouronyx Clinic co-founder, Banek. And our amazing panelists are here tonight to really help us restore confidence inside and out, whether that's through topical ingredients, high-tech treatments, lifestyle medicine, or simply the power of the mind. Now, all of you should have found a program on your seat, so you can read a little more about all of our experts on there. There's a little pencil there. There's plenty of space to take notes down, tips and tricks, everything that you learn. There's also a referral card. So if you'd like us to connect you with anybody that you hear speak here tonight, then all you have to do is tick the box, leave your email, and we'll do the connections. There's time for an audience Q&A at the end, so any questions, please save up until then, and we'll get to those. And finally, before you all leave, we have an amazing goodie bag from SkinCeuticals with a much needed SPF, because we should all be wearing it every day, but we should especially be wearing it right now. So please don't forget that when you come to leave. Anyway, I always talk for far too long at the beginning of this talk. I'm going to pass over to our speakers. They're going to say a quick hello, and then we'll get started with the main conversation. So Jonquille, over to you.
Thank you, Francesca, as always, for the invitation at the Beauty Triangle. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on this journey with you for these years. And a beautiful venue, and good evening to everybody. So my name is Jonquille Chantrey. I trained in trauma, plastics, reconstructive surgery, and then I'm pretty much full-time in aesthetic medicine, research, and beauty science. As Francesca said, I do a lot of thought leadership around the world. I've spoken on 6 continents over the last 16 years, and a lot of my work is involved in clinical trial research, thought leadership in terms of trends, working with think tanks. So from the science, from the molecules, from the cells, but then in practical terms, bringing it to the consumer and to the patients. And I just love innovation. At heart, I'm more of a creative really, despite my science roles. And I have a practice up in Alderley Edge in Cheshire. I was in London, but with the career that I have and travelling and everything, it's just too difficult really to be having multiple clinics right now. So I prefer a more streamlined service with my patients.
Well, it's our privilege to have you in London for the night, Jonquille, and I'm very, very excited to hear all of the amazing things that you have to tell us about skin and social trends and constructs of beauty and everything else. So thank you for joining us. Dr. Khan.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and again, thank you for having me here tonight. So a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Kaywaan Khan, and I have 3 of my clinics here in London, one of which is the Lanesborough, this beautiful setting that we're in at the moment, which I feel very privileged to be a part of. My special interest is not just in skin, but it's also regenerative medicine and taking a very holistic approach to well-being. And so while I love the Western medicine aspect and the evidence-based research, I also think there's a value in being holistic. And that's what I hope I'll be sharing with you tonight.
Thank you, Kaywaan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Banek. I'm a psychologist by background, as Francesca mentioned. Very atypical profile in this panel because I've spent 20 years of my career in large corporations helping people become the best in their careers, become great leaders of other people, and keep on growing in the career setup. A bit less than 4 years ago, I have shifted into medical aesthetic space, co-founded Ouronyx clinic, and learning every single day how to connect brain and beauty in different lenses for the future. So super excited to be here tonight and to share some initial learnings and experiences.
Thank you so much, Ida. I love exactly how you said it, that combination of brains and beauty, and I'm very much looking forward to chatting further about that. So our first speaker, Miss Jonquille Chantrey, she's introduced herself. Jonquille and I have known one another for, I would say, well over 10 years now, which is slightly terrifying, but I've always found her to be at the forefront of social trends in beauty and skin, and really sort of understanding the psyche of patients today, which is a real sort of unique concept. But Jonquille, maybe I can start by asking you a little bit about trends, because in the world of beauty, trends come and go, but it does seem that skin is something that never really goes out of fashion. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do a lot of my talks, my lectures around how over centuries different beauty ideals have changed. You know, if you go from year to year or decade to decade, if we look at facial trends, if we look at body trends, and those real transitions that we see. But we know that no matter which continent we're on, which country we're in, which ethnicity we're speaking to or culture, it is a consistent ideal. Mm-hmm. It's a consistent beauty ideal. And then we looked at it scientifically and we studied 14,500 consumers over 18 countries. And we also researched 1,300 doctors as well. Gosh. And we looked at, what doctors think is great skin, or from an aesthetic perspective, what concerns them about patients. For instance, forehead lines, fine line wrinkles, structural dimensional components, and the skin quality. Mm-hmm. We also then compared that to how consumers felt about themselves.
That must have been fascinating.
It was really interesting, the differences, and also the ages that the doctors feel that patients should start to treat versus the consumers themselves. But the number one headline element was skin quality, and this was throughout all the different countries. We're talking 18 different countries that we studied in that research.
But skin quality it denotes skin health, and skin health then denotes health in general, and that that goes back to our primitive instincts as well, where we were seeking a partner, a mate, and actually you just want somebody who looks healthy and fertile, and I suppose somebody who's going to go the long run with you.
Isn't it interesting? And the evolutionary psychologists that work within this space as well, they describe this, that I remember reading about Nancy Etkoff, who I think is incredible. She said that beauty is, when you recognize it, it's an instinctive element to it. But actually describing it and breaking down what beauty is, it's much more subjective and it's more complex. But I think skin is the thing that is consistent throughout. So obviously, and again, we published on this, what are the attributes of skin quality that throughout all different ethnicities people are aiming for. It's skin tone, skin firmness, smoothness, brightness, luminosity, etc.
But it must also change throughout history as well. And I know that a lot of your research has really looked hundreds and hundreds of years back, right to the beginning of time practically. And I'm sure there were times 500 years ago where we thought that healthy looking skin meant it being very sort of white and painting lead on it. And now we're talking about glass skin and we want it to be reflective and gleaming.
Yeah, and I've been working at the moment on the glass skin trend because, of course, that started in South Korea, as many of the trends do, and then they filter through Asia, and then we find them in the West. And it was first described as this skin that was so luminous, so smooth, that it was reflective. And I've actually just been working on it in 64-year-old patients and 70-year-old patients at the moment, because I think it's easier to achieve these results in the younger patients,
always
30s, etc. That's not difficult to achieve incredible results. But actually, we know that there's so much need for diversity and equality within the beauty and aesthetic space. So I'm really trying to explore how to get better skin.
It's far more inclusive. I think that's really important. And so if we do want this beautiful, glassy, gleaming skin, regardless of whatever age we are there topical ingredients that we can start to incorporate that might help us in that pursuit, or are we looking at treatments?
It always starts with the topicals, as well as a consideration of the diet and lifestyle and stress factors. So in terms of the topical ingredients, we can go on to those specific ones that we should be considering, but we know for a fact that lifestyle, genetics, and stress have such a huge impact on skin. And of course, the environmental aggressors to the aging of skin, that accounts for usually around 90% of the skin aging process.
That's why we have an SPF in the goodie bags.
And so all of these different factors are very important to consider. We know about the impact of sugar, of dairy, of gluten, of the inflammatory aspects, not just on the skin as a clear kind of denominator. We can sort of see that as an initial consideration, but all of those impacts that it has on the general health. And in terms of topicals, well, it all depends on the individual, right? So, and I've said this before, I think that skincare is something that consumers tend to feel very empowered about. It's a choice. People feel that they have an agency, and it's actually a kind of active self-care to either go around a beauty hall or to have a look online and to try different things.
And it's very immediate as well. If we're trying to see an expert such as any of you up here on the panel, that can take weeks, months sometimes, to be honest. And actually skincare is very quick and accessible.
It is. And, in my clinic, I do really encourage people to have that skin health assessment first. And it's not an add-on at the end of a consultation. It's part of a very clear strategy as to how to get the best results for my patients. So I need to understand what they're currently using, really kind of break it down. What's their skin history over, since sort of childhood, and particularly adolescence, and any specific hormonal changes or lifestyle changes that happened, traumatic events, etc. And then really break it down. We know that in some studies, up to 50% of people will describe that they have sensitive skin.
And I think this is on the rise as well, sensitivity.
Yeah, but it's important to differentiate if it's true sensitivity, as in, is it a pathology like eczema, psoriasis, etc., or have you actually developed sensitized skin because it's been inappropriate use of topical products.
And you've disrupted that skin barrier, and then all the inflammation is then coming up.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really trying to understand those elements and then creating a completely bespoke protocol for the patient in front of me. And that does start with a topical skincare regime. I usually incorporate alpha and beta hydroxy acids, sometimes polyhydroxy acids, and in terms of cleansers. Again, depending on the skin type, I'm just a huge fan of salicylic acid use, actually, not just for the control of the oil gland, but for other skin refining factors. Of course, vitamin A is crucial if tolerated, and there are
that skin cell turnover, and just to keep everything ticking over nicely.
Yeah, to really improve that skin cell turnover. And vitamin C, other antioxidants that are going to be crucial to cell metabolism, cell health.
You're right, though, to say it's all about a personalised approach, and I think that's why the partnership with the right doctor is so important in these conversations. Tell us about the new product that you're working with, because it's very interesting.
Yeah, so I've been involved in quite a lot of different types of injectables and skin care products, bringing them to market for major companies actually around the world. At the moment, I do a lot of work with SkinCeuticals as well. And I've worked on their antioxidants and some of their other topicals. But this time, this one's very interesting. It's looking at peptides. So you've probably heard there's a lot of buzz at the moment around peptides. Short chain amino acids that are real building blocks to skin health. Of course, collagen, elastin are constructed from peptides. So this particular product that I've been working on and doing some clinical research on, clinical testing on, it's incorporating 2 types of peptides which are mimicking botulinum toxin.
So they're having an incredible effect on the fine lines, the wrinkles, all of the things that initially at the beginning of our conversation we were saying can be a sort of barrier for people when they don't like their skin.
Yeah, I think the science and the testing that we've seen on this is going to be very interesting, and I think it's going to be a real game changer. I think it's going to create a new lane in terms of skincare. I think there'll be a lot of sort of copycat type products, but it's whether or not they will actually be able to deliver the science, and we are making sure that clinical credibility and scientific credibility is there. So it's very interesting.
It sounds fascinating. I love the idea of our skincare mimicking injectables. I mean, for a lot of people who actually don't want to have injectables, that is a game changer. Tell me a little bit about how you found skin optimization to have evolved over the years, because you've had an extraordinary history. You were working in Beverly Hills at one point. You were Zainab Baji. Like, you've really sort of been at the crux of some quite, punchy treatments actually from what you've told me. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's my greatest privilege, and it's the most priceless thing of my career, is to have been invited into different countries all around 6 continents and just meeting people and really diving deep into skin concerns, general aesthetic concerns, be it structural, dimensional, body, etc. But in terms of skin, I've seen some pretty incredible things, and extremely invasive, actually. I really, if you're speaking about Zainab Baji, very famous dermatologist, he really changed the landscape of medical skincare, I think, in this market, and I think we owe a lot to him and what he did. So I worked really closely with him, with his scientific team for many years, and with him in clinic. And I would see him put these patients under general anaesthetic, and he would do very, very deep chemical peels under general anaesthetic.
Under general.
Yeah. And then he would grab the laser that was always kind of somehow came from the ceiling, and there were multiple different lasers that would, he would just sort of grab and just absolutely blast these patients.
My goodness, so they were walking around probably looking quite inflamed afterwards.
Quite inflamed, Francesca, my dear. And so yeah, I'd be walking around Beverly Hills and thinking, wow, this was a norm, and this was probably about 10 years ago that I was really in the depths of that, and it was also in Southern California, but it was a real norm.
But 10 years ago actually doesn't sound that much, but actually that would be completely unheard of now. And in fact, I think there's been such a movement towards treatments that don't cause the trauma. More and more, we don't want the downtime. We don't want to take such an aggressive approach when it comes to optimizing skin.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think at that time point, for instance, Dr. Baji couldn't understand that my patients in the UK wouldn't tolerate that. So I said to him, my patients just won't tolerate that. They need to get back to their normal social activities, etc. But yeah, already I was seeing a real dichotomy of my patients and the patients within the UK versus those Western West Coast USA patients.
That's super interesting. What a fascinating backstory. And what are patients commonly requesting now in the modern day when they come to you seeking skin optimization? What are the things that actually they're hearing about and actually they're sort of turning up for on the regular?
Yeah, I think, and I say this quite often, aesthetics is the only specialty within medicine that is so driven by consumers. The new patients will come in requesting a specific product or a specific
they are much more empowered, and actually they're actively encouraged to be empowered to have those conversations with practitioners now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that aesthetic fluency is a real trend, and I've always had that type of patient in my practice, as you know, just very bright, irrelevant of their kind of background, just very discerning types of people. On the whole, most patients will leave it to me. So they'll say, I want to just kind of feel a little bit more confident, I want to feel a bit brighter, a little bit fresher. What are your thoughts? And obviously, I work a lot with skin, but they know that I do a lot in terms of the dimensions of the face, the restructuring of the face. And so yeah, a lot of that is the direct request for me actually.
So there's less of the trend of people coming and seeking the Russian lip or the fox eye,
Goodness no. And it's about being able to give the delivery of a transformation, but that's, as you always say, hyper-natural. So it's just totally not detectable. The subtlety takes a different level of sophistication with it.
And I think even the injecting techniques we're using now are so much more sophisticated. There's been such an incredible evolution over time with actually where you place the product, how you place it. We were speaking the other day about sort of when jawline and sort of profile contouring all suddenly became the rage, I suppose, profile balancing, understanding those nuances between all of the different structural elements of the face. And you really do have to give the patient a real grounding and sort of foundation in that understanding, I think.
Completely, and even taking it before that, as I said, I was working with the scientist in the US, in LA. We were trying to understand what the best way to measure a facial profile is: the nose, the chin, the jawline. We then were involved in bringing that new product to market, that new injectable. And then I launched the technique of that in 2019. And then it just absolutely blew up. Like after we did that live injection in 2019, everybody started injecting jawlines and chins.
That's interesting.
But inappropriately, unfortunately. And that's why I think there's always a fear when people see those bad cosmetic results, that they think, I don't want to have that, I don't want to make my jawline heavy, I don't want to make my jowl heavy. And absolutely right, it shouldn't be that. It should be done in the most correct fashion that's mathematically precise and correct aesthetically for that patient.
And actually I think your understanding of the mathematics plus the art is actually what enables that subtlety and that sort of artistry to come through. We're seeing a huge rise in the power of combination treatments, and this is something that you're also quite well versed in. Obviously there's the topical skincare, there's the injectables, and then there's a myriad of other energy-based devices. So how do you figure out, I suppose, the appropriate combination for the patient, and what are the devices that I suppose you're integrating that you're seeing really transformative results for skin now?
So it all comes down to my consultation one-on-one with my patients. It's a very personal moment, and I really need to understand the reality of what the patient's trying to achieve, how committed they're going to be in terms of their own skincare management, how often they're going to want to come into clinic. Some people, I have patients that fly in obviously from all over the world, and they just want to come in, have everything done in one session, and then they'll see me 3 months later. So it really very much depends on their lifestyle, their goals, and their skin type. Most definitely, as I said, managing that topical skincare, I use lots of different devices in my clinic. I combine high-level IPL with microneedling with radiofrequency. I've been microneedling for 20 years. I use platelet-rich plasma because of my work on wound healing regeneration. So most definitely the combination, but always bringing it back to the anatomy of the patient. The face, wherever it is, aging from multiple different layers. So we need to treat those different layers.
It's understanding the bone versus the muscle, the fat, the skin.
Yes, most definitely. And, always thinking ahead. So not right now and how you're going to age in the next, couple of years, but how is that going to be maintained over the mid and long term as well. And again, I performed some research with some colleagues of mine. We performed it over 5 continents, and we proved that combination therapy allowed for happier patients. The patients were more satisfied when they were having combination therapy versus just one single type of treatment.
Isn't that interesting? But it goes back to that holistic approach, and it has to be a healthier approach as well, doing a little bit of everything in moderation.
And what's needed, not just what's on trend. And whilst I love working with trends and having that visibility and awareness of that, just making sure that I'm supporting the patient is that might not be right for you.
I think we can be led by trends and informed by them and inspired by them, but at the end of the day, you also have to work with the patient to enhance their individuality. Isn't that why people come to see you ultimately?
Yeah, and I think that thankfully there is more of an awareness of that again. Sometimes I think with trends and within societies that are so quick moving, and so surface first, individuality can be lost. The real underlying reason why people are pursuing procedures can be lost. And I really am very, very keen in understanding the motivations behind patients as to why they're choosing to do what they do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jonquille. That was super interesting, and I think a really nice, well, actually, you've touched on little bits about what Dr. Khan will speak about with the regenerative medicine, a bit of psychology with Udo as well. So I think there's a bigger conversation to be had here, but thank you very much for being here with us tonight. So our second speaker is Dr. Kaywaan Khan. He's already introduced himself to you. He's doing some fascinating things, I have to say, very forward-looking, innovative adjustments and I suppose progressive things in the world of aesthetics and well-being right here at the Lanesborough. So really interested to talk a little bit more about that with you, Dr. Khan. But maybe we can start by explaining a little bit about regenerative medicine, because that really is your specialism. What does regenerative medicine really mean to us as consumers and as patients?
Yeah, I love that we're starting with explaining the terminology, because we use this terminology a lot. And regenerative medicine is essentially your resilience and your ability to repair. So as we age or as we go through disease processes, we find that our ability to repair and to be resilient slows down or just isn't there. So think about perhaps when you're younger and you could go on a really late night out, and the next few days you're back, you've got the energy. But now if you do, as you get older, you might find that it's a lot more difficult to recover and bounce back.
You're talking about not being able to manage hangovers quite as well now, yeah.
So that applies to our skin as well. How does our skin bounce back, and how does our skin recover? And how can we harness the science and the power of regenerative medicine in order to be able to deliver that repair, that resilience to our skin? And regenerative medicine goes deeper. So we all know the aging process is involved with predetermined genetic factors and the accumulation of environmental damage over time. But what does that actually mean on a cellular level? How do we understand and appreciate the science a bit more? So thinking about the cellular level of aging, we would talk about DNA. DNA, the building block of our cells, the building block of our life, is aging as well. And every single time a cell divides, it needs to be kept intact, and it needs to repair and divide appropriately. And that is what happens over time, is that we accumulate all this damage in our DNA. But even more with the DNA, there's also mitochondria and there's other little machines within the factory of our cells that start to slow down and burn out a little bit. And it's about how we can keep those going for as long as possible and make sure that they are tough and doing the right job for as long as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about the longevity. And you're right, every time the cell is replicating, little faults are coming up, right, and leading to that degeneration and that disease. And there are some fascinating therapies out there that I think we're only just starting to understand more about today, which can really help to prevent a lot of that. Tell us a little bit about the treatments that you're offering within this world of regenerative medicine. What are the most sought after things? What would you be doing for patients here, sort of under that very forward-looking umbrella?
So we touched on a few of them already, and many of you will be aware of using the topical skincare, using peptides and the new innovations on how to actually communicate with your cells. You've heard of PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma treatment, using your own body's healing mechanism. So this is regenerative medicine. This is your own body's healing mechanisms.
This is where we're taking the blood, spinning it down and re-injecting it.
Exactly. So taking the blood out, spinning it, taking an extract of the plasma. And remember, throughout your body, your body has to repair and heal itself all the time. So it has damage. And what's healing it? It's your own body's plasma and its healing mechanisms. So what if we can target that in areas which are struggling to heal, or which areas which are actually seeing some damage? So that may be in the skin surface, it may be laxity, it may be in joints, where you can also use PRP in joints. Taking that one step further, we are evaluating also the power of stem cells and exosomes. So everybody's heard of stem cells. They've often been touted in the media and in popular science about their ability to regenerate themselves. So a lot of our own cells will have what we call cell senescence. Over time, adult differentiated cells, over a number of divisions, will stop differentiating, will stop dividing, and they'll just stop. and then they need to be replaced by our stem cells. So stem cells have the power to be anything they want to be. So we're not just there yet with our stem cells. We're still doing a lot of research on that. But as well as stem cells, there's something that stem cells and other cells release called exosomes. Exosomes are these vesicles that are essentially envelopes that our cells release to communicate with each other. And they contain a combination of not just proteins, amino acids, peptides, but also DNA, mRNA. And that can help to repair the nucleic acids within our cells and also tell the cells what to do. On that same topic, we can talk about polynucleotides, because that's also something that's very current at the moment. Polynucleotides are essentially marine biotechnology. They're the nucleic acids from another living organism injected into our cells or into our skin, and they help with repair. Why? Because DNA needs to replicate, it needs to repair itself, and by delivering nucleic acids, we can mop up the free radicals, and we can also help to repair our own DNA as well.
It's very interesting, this whole category that you were talking about. It's injectable. I mean, the exosomes, you're microneedling, I think, and then you're applying topically the exosomes on top to sink them into the right layer of the skin. The polynucleotides are an injectable, but they're much more so like a skin booster versus a dermal filler or a toxin. So they are in that category almost of, I suppose, biostimulators. They are actively encouraging our body to reproduce new collagen, really kickstart the fibroblasts and I suppose heal in a very targeted and bespoke way.
Yeah. So what we want to do is provide ourselves with the right ingredients in order to repair, but we also want to tell it to repair. And sometimes we might damage it first in order to help it repair.
The micro trauma.
The micro trauma.
Love to create the micro, not the under the general anaesthetic trauma, the micro trauma.
Well, there's very many ways in which you can create that trauma, and that can be aggressive or it can be very mild. But ultimately, a lot of the treatments that you'll be having with anesthetics will lead to some sort of skin damage or skin irritation, whether that be in the form of peels, microneedling, lasers, so on and so forth. Once you've had those treatments, you've created that damage. Now the cells, now the skin has to repair itself, and to repair itself stronger and even more resilient. And this is where these other mechanisms, by supplying, for example, the plasma, or it be the exosomes or the polynucleotides, or even as basic as your own lifestyle, your nutrition and what you're eating, they all play an important role in the repair and the recovery.
And actually it's interesting because Jonquille and I spoke a lot about the power of the combination treatments, and you've taken that concept and you've really applied it to regenerative medicine. You do a fantastic treatment here called, is it the time traveller treatment? Tell us a little bit about that, because that is really, it's incorporating all of these fantastic technologies that you've just spoken about, but I feel like it's very unique, and you've elevated the aesthetic treatment for all of us there as well.
So it sounds really cool and exciting. It's a time travel treatment, and the aim is to take you back in time slightly with your skin, with your aging process. So as I said, the aging process is the slowing down of the regenerative process, the slowing down of the resilience and the repair. So how can we boost that? And it's by utilizing all the technologies that we have to date in a facial treatment, so that it's still somewhat relaxing, somewhat holistic. We incorporate not just the microneedling element, which is the microtrauma. We've also got the exosomes, and we also use skin boosters that supply the amino acids and the building blocks to help repair the skin. We finish off with some phototherapy, so we know that red light therapy and near-infrared therapy helps to energize those mitochondria and give those powerhouses the ability to repair and recover.
So I think you're missing out the key part, which is that Dr. Khan does all of this amazing wizardry with his regenerative medicine, but then there's also an incredible therapist who's there at the same time. Whilst he's injecting you, she's like massaging your hands and your feet, and there's like CBD balms, and you've really sort of elevated the holistic side, which I find fascinating.
So it's about taking evidence-based medicine, but incorporating it in a very holistic way, because sometimes what we do within clinical medicine, and everybody's experienced this. You go into a doctor's office, it could even be an aesthetic medicine doctor's office. You've gone in for maybe some Botox or Profilo. You're in and you're out very quickly. You've had a few injections. You feel a little bit traumatized by it, and you were feeling really tense before you went in, and you feel slightly relieved it's over. You might be a little bit happy that it's over, but it hasn't done anything for the adrenaline that you've gone through in that process. And sometimes as clinicians, we don't actually appreciate the nerves that it takes to be a patient experiencing that. So when you come in for a facial, it's not just about the injections and the microneedling, it's also about what goes with that, the sound therapy, the smells, the massage, the touch. And it's really important because we are all human. We're not machines, and we talk about machinery, but we forget the human element in all of this.
That's a really good point, actually. Plus, you're in the Lanesborough Spa, which is just the most cosseting place imaginable. You also start, which I really love, with there's sort of like a little shot, like there's turmeric, there's ginger. It's really nice because I think that's a real nod also to the importance of lifestyle medicine as well. And actually, you mentioned it earlier, you know, the importance of supplementing correctly, adequate nutrition. Where does that fit into your approach within the sort of world that you exist in?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned rightly, we start off with a turmeric and ginger shot, and we finish off with some supplements to help the skin recover, to give it what it needs. But it also allows us to open up a conversation with the client about talking about lifestyle, the things that you should avoid afterwards. But more importantly, this leads us to talk about lifestyle. And actually, I just did a treatment today, and my client said, I've got a very good nutritionist, and my daughter was suffering with eczema and tried a few different creams, wasn't working, spoke to this nutritionist, and lo and behold, her eczema has cleared up since making those changes. And he wanted my perspective on it, I wanted my thought on it. And the reality is that you can do all of these treatments and they're really good at helping recover and repair some of the damage that you've experienced throughout life. But with the right lifestyle changes, you can optimize your treatment results even further, and you can really optimize your life beyond just your skin. So lifestyle does play a really important part. It reminds me of a study that was done in 2002, which looked at people in Western society compared to those that live in indigenous tribes. And they found that acne was not present in any of these people that are not in Western society.
That is really interesting.
So fascinating.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, so it was one of a landmark study in 2002 and showed that acne may be a disease of Western society. Now, what does that even mean? What we can take from it is there must be a lifestyle component. There must be something that we're doing. And I think this extends beyond acne. I think there's so many conditions that we're seeing within Western society that are progressively increasing in the number and prevalence. And we don't fully understand it. Now, we've got all these amazing medications and lasers to combat them, but wait, how did they start in the first place?
But sometimes those are just addressing the symptom and they're not really digging down and getting to the root cause. But I think you're so right, and actually it really underlines that importance of understanding that everything is connected. The skin is influenced by so many other things and processes and systems in the body, and particularly these ones that you mentioned, acne, eczema, even psoriasis, that there's a lot of inflammation in the skin and inflammation elsewhere in the body that we're only just starting to understand, I think, these connections.
Yeah, I mean, inflammation is really the key word here as well. And what are we doing that's increasing inflammation? Someone mentioned in the audience, stress is definitely an aspect of it. But stress can also be a good thing. So if our bodies can respond in the right way without being too inflammatory, but being actually more healing and promoting our own health, that's the key aspect. Now, how do we harness the power of that? And this is why some of the things that I included within my treatments, the exosome technology, the utilizing of supplements, that's only a part of it. A consultation is where it really begins, and going into the details of people's lives and how we can help them in the most holistic way.
I like that you mentioned the difference between the good stress and the bad stress, though, because we're never going to eliminate stress entirely, and actually there's a difference between the cold shower stress that really invigorates you and the stress, the cortisol, that actually sort of runs us into the ground. It's important to remember. We spoke a little bit about topical ingredients with Jonquille, but with your sort of future-facing hat on, what do you expect skincare even in the future to look like for us?
Okay, so if you gave me a lot of money to go out and create the perfect skincare regime, and I think this is coming in the future, it would be taking a very both scientific and holistic approach. Step one, I'd probably take a swab, and that would be your DNA, and I'd also scan your skin with the most high-tech cameras, but not just cameras, it also needs to be looking at hydration levels, so there'll be different measurements. I'd then take that, analyze your genetics and analyze your skin, and using AI, I'd take those multivariate aspects and put that into the AI and try and figure out what are the topicals that you need, what are the molecules that you'll benefit from most. There will probably be a whole library of peptides in the future that we will need to handpick for each individual. And then I'd use a machine to compound them in a pharmaceutical way and deliver them to your skin in a perfectly arranged skincare program. I think that would be the ideal.
So it's essentially creating something that is hyper-personalised.
Hyper-personalised medicine, I think, is the future. So personalised medicine in the form of really understanding each individual. Because what is it that we're doing? Whenever you come to see a clinician, when you come to see a facialist, you're being talked about skincare, you're being talked about what skin treatments may benefit you. And the key thing is what may benefit you. Often what we're doing is trial and error. Now, when you come to a clinician, you're doing it with expertise of that trial and error process. When you do it yourself, you're doing it kind of blindly based on what the marketing has been towards you. And so trial and error is how we understand what suits our body. Some people might find that vitamin C brightens their skin. Others might find that vitamin C causes red blotchy patches on their skin. And the thing that we're missing is the personalization aspect. Now, right now, the best thing that you can do is go to an expert to find out what might suit you, because we do everything from skin analysis to asking you the right questions. But in the future, certainly it will be taking the genomics and also utilizing AI as part of that process as well.
I love that though, because it's using AI and technology, but it's also making sure it's in collaboration with the human touch and the human oversight, I suppose, more importantly. We can't rely on technology to do everything. We can't make doctors, practitioners such as yourselves completely redundant. We need to have that perfect marriage of the two. It's like the blend between art and science, isn't it, in the same way?
I think it's just going to open up even more roles. So as I talked about compounding the pharmaceutical ingredients, we're going to have pharmacists that are going to be more involved within your skincare. We're going to have clinicians that are going to be overseeing the whole process. We're going to have those that are interested in genomics and really evaluating the genetics. I think it's not going to close doors for roles. It's actually going to open even more doors, because we will have all this information that needs to be interpreted and needs to be taking the patient through the journey. Really.
Super. Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. That was a really nice future-looking sort of insights into what we can expect in the years to come from skin.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our third and final speaker is Ida Banek, co-founder of Ouronyx Clinic and also a professor of psychology, which I find fascinating because, Ida, you must have so many interesting insights and observations into that link between skin and mental health, which is so huge and so topical right now. How have you seen this develop in recent years?
Yeah, so it's a big topic. I mean, the connection in between brain and skin, we can probably talk weeks around, but it's very evident that the way we look impacts the way we feel about ourselves. The way we feel about ourselves has a direct impact in the way we perform, we interact with other people, the way we are in the end successful. And again, the more we are successful, the more content we are with ourselves. So there is a direct kind of a circle that closes it up. I would say recent years, probably even post-COVID years, where we stare into our face and our skin more than ever before, are bringing this kind of picture-perfect type of thinking. You know, we constantly compete with others and with ourselves. Modern technologies, exposure to looking into what good looks like. It's become very difficult to say, oh, I look good and I feel good about myself, because we constantly chase something more, something better.
You're right.
That glowing component, that perfection that we strive to achieve, and it's really hard.
I think you hit the nail on the head, perfection. I think you're right. COVID was such a turning point, actually. You know, suddenly seeing ourselves up close, unfiltered, in animation, on a screen, often poor lighting. I think that really did open the doors to a huge new sort of way of interacting with our skin, and sometimes quite negatively. And it's a shame, because it feels like technology could play such a valuable role in skin health in the future, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword, and sometimes technology is the thing that is really driving this pursuit of perfection, like you said.
Yeah, and human beings are very visual, you know. We learn to present ourselves through photos because it's very easy, right? Every photo showing is telling many stories, right? So we want to perfectionize it, we want to optimize it as much as possible, choices are growing. There are many of them. We keep on trialing, and the more you try, the less satisfied you are.
It's true, but we've also gone from being a society that's all about the two-dimensional, the photography, into the three-dimensional in the video. I mean, you can see it on social media. Images now, static photography, it doesn't have the engagement that video does, and now we're seeing ourselves in animation, we're seeing ourselves three-dimensionally, and I think that must have a huge impact actually on how we engage with our image and our appearance.
Exactly. I'm probably the worst example of role modeling in aesthetics industry. I tried my first Botox at 45.
I love that.
And I did it because I've seen myself in a video in a way that I looked probably 10 years older than I remembered from my 2D photo. So it was an instant kick and kind of a motivation. I need to start looking into what's causing it and how can I address it. That's really the mimics that is bringing the need much more pronounced than ever before.
And that's interesting that was your personal experience. I mean, as the co-founder of an aesthetics clinic yourself, you obviously have great insights into the patient cohorts that are coming through and what their skin concerns might be. But what would you say are the things that really are quite detrimental to our self-esteem when it comes to our appearance and our skin?
I dare to say that, we have many relationships in our lifespan. Probably one of the most difficult ones is with our own self-image because it evolves. And, when the balancing between physical and mental well-being, it's somehow a paradox, because when we are young and our physical appearance is at the peak, unfortunately our self-confidence is full of question marks, it's quite low. We want to blend in, we don't want to stand out, we try to be someone else. We come with a photo, I want to look like this, in order to prove yourself that worth that is coming through perception of other faces. But as we mature, as we age, obviously that self-confidence luckily starts picking up, but our physical appearance starts declining, right?
You're so right, that's such an interesting
paradox.
way to
Where is that sweet spot of being in full balance, emotionally and physically? There are some nice studies coming out, say it's our 50s. I just turned 50, so I'm in a good spot. but it is something that's worth monitoring, right? Because there are beautiful studies. There is one from 2007, so it's already old-fashioned, from MIT, that predicted that every kid born after 2010 has more than 50% chance to live beyond the age of 105. So if you put that into perspective, it means that those kids will not retire at 65 and will work until 80, 90. They will still start aging at 30. And they will need to put a lot of sustainable options into place to be fresh and relevant socially at the age of 85 or 90. So I think it's a lot socially and psychologically that is coming ahead of us when it comes in choices. How do we want to preserve skin, looks, and accept aging as a concept?
You're so right. Even the architecture of life and how that's evolving is having an impact on actually how we perceive ourselves and our appearance. Even, we do a lot of talks on hormonal health, menopause, and actually that's a really interesting conversation when you think that once upon a time women were supposed to hit menopause and then die shortly afterwards. I mean, it's actually quite depressing. But now we're seeing menopause as this second spring, and it should be a chapter for empowerment and being far wiser and sager and more confident. And I love that you pointed that out, actually, like almost our self-esteem and our confidence grows, but then we do also have to balance that with visually, in our increasingly visual society, what we're less happy about with now. Are there key things that people come to the clinic with, actually saying, are there skin conditions? Is it is it skin texture? Is it fine lines and wrinkles? Do you have data to show really what we've drilled down into that causes that loss in self-esteem?
Yeah, so in the clinic we basically do a very thorough onboarding process where it takes almost half an hour before you see a doctor to collect all the information, all the data about yourself medically, about your lifestyle. We ask questions about what are your aesthetic goals in depth. We ask about questions about aesthetic fears. We do a small personality assessment. So by the time you reach a doctor, there is 2D photography, there is 3D photography, and there is an hour of a conversation led by data around reasons what you actually want to achieve with that visit and your aesthetic journey. And very often we see faces of people saying, wow, you are asking me all those questions. It's the first time where introspectively I actually spent half an hour thinking, why am I here?
Because we rush through life never really asking ourselves
Exactly.
those questions.
Very often, kind of a nasolabial fold that is deeper than it was yesterday. You see it in the morning, you say, oh, maybe I go and see a doctor and talk about it. But then a conversation that starts about, who you are and how you live and what actually matters for you, what is your fear, brings you in a very different conversation with the doctor than the reason why you felt you are actually visiting the practice for. So I would say it's a variety of reasons why we see people coming in. I was running a bit of data analytics, and it was around 900 patients over the last 300 years that we have full data set across many age groups, starting from 18 to I think 78 was the older patient that we had in a mix. And you can see some similarities and differences, right? So from 35 onwards, the aesthetic goals almost across the line are always, I want to look more fresh and I want to look well rested. Before that, it's I want to look more feminine or masculine, and I want to look more striking in a way. So you are seeking for alterations rather than optimization. So it's a different conversation with the doctor, obviously, in between two groups. But funnily enough, when it comes to aesthetic fears, across the board, genders or age groups, it's always fear of unnatural results.
Always.
Jonquille touched it at the very beginning. There is unfortunately a lot of examples that people are scared of seeing on their face. They want to remove that, followed by long-term complications, particularly in young groups, right? Thinking if I'm 25 and I'm starting my aesthetics journey now, and if I'm to live up to 100, what down the line it means for me if I start using dermal fillers too early, right? So it's a lot of conscious conversations now. What are more sustainable choices I can start with to prolong and push down some more synthetic products in my face going forward, which is great. I think it's the outcome we all hope to see.
But it's really interesting because you're creating almost this psychological blueprint for every patient that comes through that really does, it gets you to know them better as a patient, but it also gets them to know themselves better. I think that's almost the key sort of point that you want to get everyone to, so that they really understand why they're going on this journey. You mentioned different ages and genders. I'm fascinated to know, is there any difference between men and women and how we pursue skin optimization, aesthetic treatment? What have you noticed?
Well, funnily enough, because we have hair and skin treatments that have kind of equal representation of interest, mainly all the men come in because of hair improvement, while women come for the skin optimization. But then somehow down the line, they start changing their perception because both are having equal importance. It's just what we are more vocal about at the entry point, right?
100%. And actually, we spoke about skin being such a sort of visual certificate of health, but actually hair is really important in terms of what it says about us psychologically as well.
Sure. And funnily enough, when you ask questions, because obviously on aesthetic goals driven by hair choice to visitors, we have a bit different questionnaire. Still, they pronounce and say unnatural result is something I fear. So those are the people that would not go for hair transplant type of procedures. They're seeking for more self-regenerative techniques where they can prevent hair loss rather than deal with it when it's somehow too late.
That makes perfect sense, and I think you're so right. That's exactly where this sort of more regenerative category comes in, where we're optimizing and we're sort of fueling our body to create these sort of building blocks for future skin health under its own steam, without sort of adding in the extra things. When it comes to having these conversations in an ethical and responsible way, how can we go about pursuing that? Because obviously we can empower people so much that they want to have these treatments, but then there's also the risk that we take it too far. And we sort of want to keep it sort of at an even keel. So how do we go about doing that?
So I'm a big believer in data and data collection and monitoring, right? There are beautiful technologies and tools outside that help us show and kind of record the start of the journey. And if you take solid measurements and tracking along the journey, it's relatively easy to spot when it's a moment to say it's enough. It's better to pause and stop because, from elevation perspective, from proportions and so on, we're just in a perfect spot focus on the quality of skin, on some topical solutions and so on. Don't take it overboard. So technology helps a lot. Knowing the psychology archetype of a patient also helps a bit as well, because we can predict who will be aggressive ones, assertive ones that will want to go for more because they are very competitive in their lifestyle and life choices, and those that are more cautious that we shouldn't worry about because they would need to be pushed from time to time much more than going overboard. But having insights and a lot of data to play with helps a lot in advising and guiding different personality archetypes in the right direction.
I mean, even screenings for sort of body dysmorphia have become more commonplace in aesthetics clinic. Is that something that you think we're going to have to continue to do as society becomes even more visual in sort of different directions and dimensions?
I think for all of us here, it's kind of almost an ethical responsibility to incorporate it in everything we do every single day. Because if you take a look into data, body dysmorphia around the world, percentage-wise, hasn't changed for decades. So it's in between 2 and 3% in any pocket of the world. Mm-hmm. However, data clearly shows that body dysmorphia representation in aesthetic clinics grows towards 18 to 20%. Mm-hmm. So in a way, we attract people that have issues beyond the skin level that like to address in the conversation and consultation they come and seek for. So in my team, we have once a quarter a training day where we openly speak about it, how to recognize people that need care beyond the treatment, how to address it, and what's really the right balance. Because as you just mentioned, you can always say, well, now it's enough, it's better to stop. But people with body dysmorphia will not hear it that way, right? They may agree with you, but they will go out and still find a doctor that will do something for them that shouldn't have happened.
Absolutely, and there's always a doctor, sadly, who will pick up the syringe.
So it's really important to have not only a doctor, but the whole team trained to provide care and support, that we prevent those type of interventions and make sure that we secure people are leaving the clinic in a better both mental and physical stage than when they came in.
That's so interesting, and it really strikes me that that's a really similar note that Kaywaan and I ended our conversation on in saying actually it has to be this marriage of technology but also the human touch, the human mind. You know, you're talking about using imaging devices to track and measure patients' progress and their evolution aesthetically. But that is only as strong as the person who then comes in your support network and really amplifies that message. So it has to be a marriage of those two worlds, isn't it? Science and art. It's basically skin, isn't it? Science and art. Thank you so much, Ida. That was really, really fascinating, really eye-opening. So that very much brings us to the end of tonight's discussion. And I hope that everyone here has found it as compelling as I have to listen to our speakers. It's really, really interesting, and I think I sort of just touched on that now, but you know, skin is our sort of universal visual certificate of health, but actually it evolves and it means so much in sort of different ways to each of us. But actually I love how each of you really emphasize that perfect synergy between science and art, technology, human touch, and I think, you know, skin is going to continue to advance. The things that we can do, the things that we can predict, how we can optimize it and shape it. But the most important thing really is doing it hand in hand with a really responsible, ethical practitioner who can guide you in the right direction. You've been a very quiet audience, I have to say. I'm sure you've all been making copious notes and really paying attention. We do have time for some audience questions, but also if you... I love, so keen in the front row.
I was late, so
you have to make up for it now, yeah, fair dues. If you do need to scoot off, please don't forget goodie bags as well, and leave your referral cards. And please don't leave pencils down the sides of the chair. We keep being told that the Lanesborough keep finding our mini pencils in the restaurant over the course of the next month. So yes, question time, Marie.
Yes, you were talking, Jonquille, I haven't listened to all your talk because I came late again, but you were talking about the differences between the approaches of the Americans and the English. I'm French and I have a very different approach from most of you guys, I think, and I'm very more into natural. I'm also older than all of you guys there. I'm probably not you, because you told me your age, but you all look so young. And in France, actually, it's good to be a bit asymmetrical or not to be perfect.
Celebrate those individual quirks.
Perfections. And for me, this like sort of perfect look is actually not what I love. I love seeing
Agreed.
scars. I love, when you see like asymmetrical lips.
Well, don't they say the most beautiful women? I mean, that you look at people like Kate Moss, and actually they're not symmetrical. Their faces do not conform to the golden ratio. There's always a slight offness with these people.
But I was very, very also very fascinated by the approach of like holistic and like music. To me, actually, the lack of music today is very important for me, like massages, smells, and that's what you're doing. So I can't wait. I saw you had a clinic. I'm following all your Instagram. But I saw you had a clinic on Harley Street as well. So you don't need to be a member here to come.
You don't need to be a member here to have your treatment here with the time travel one. And I guess being at the Lanesborough, there is this element of the spa and an added relaxation, which is different from a clinical environment. If you were to go to, for example, Harley Street. So I definitely say, do try out the Lanesborough, and you do not need to.
You probably lost all your Harley Street patients. So
I
it's
know.
not here now.
Because I have another spa where you actually conducted some talks. So I haven't been here apart from talks, and it's beautiful, it's gorgeous. But is it completely out of reach to come here for like a treatment? Let's say a day with you, how much would that cost? Give us an idea.
Yeah, really good question about the treatment. So there's a whole host of treatments that we do here, and
What's the entry point?
the entry point starts at £275.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
And you can stay in the spa for the day.
Yeah, so you can get
You're
access
going to get your days worth, don't worry.
Yeah, you get access to the spa
I'm
as
gonna stay here. I'll
well.
come
Yeah,
tomorrow. What do I
absolutely.
Look right in.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the entry, and so yeah, there is an opportunity to.
You've got your referral card, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions? Goodness, such a well-behaved audience.
Yeah, I'll ask a question.
The front row.
Yeah, exactly. That's where you sit there.
It was more about the stigma around getting sort of certain aesthetic treatments. I was particularly interested in what you were saying about the really aggressive treatments that were being done about 10 years ago, and how, I guess, was there sort of stigma around getting those kind of treatments done at that time? Have you found that has changed over the years in the way of people wanting to get treatments, or wanting to get treatments but not necessarily want anybody to know that they've got treatments?
Beautiful question, thank you. And it also ties in to your comment. The geographical aspects of aesthetics and the pursuit of aesthetic treatments is very interesting. And as we've said, I've done a lot of research in lots of different countries. I've worked in France. I did the Juvederm Volite study clinical trial in France. It was all French patients. It has changed. Now, in my patients, in my personal demographic, they were always very private, very discerning. They didn't want anybody to know about it. So, I've always had private waiting rooms. Nobody crosses over. There is no communal areas within my clinic. We see that in different areas of the world, some people are more proud to have aesthetic treatments. They have the stigmata and the taboos around having procedures are completely different. In fact, you were discussing archetypes. We did a lot of work on the archetypes of the aesthetic patients, and we published on it. And some patients are beautification patients. They will always want to be more attractive. They will always pursue to be more attractive, no matter their age. Other people are positive ages, and they just want to sort of quietly look good for their age. So it's more that we've seen that over different demographics in terms of geography. So I think it's going back to those archetypes. I think is very, very interesting. But yeah, more kind of low key is probably the more common request.
I can see that as well. Your story was based in Beverly Hills, like Rodeo Drive. I mean, I feel like that's a very different patient archetype to probably people in London who would not be so willing to go out after a full, very aggressive laser on their face.
Definitely, and when I've worked.
Dubai now. Dubai has replaced LA. I think in Dubai everybody has a facial every day,
Yeah.
it's a normal thing to do, right?
Yeah, and when I
I
was
can tell you because they have an Ouronyx in Dubai.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
How's
big
it
cultural differences.
Well, I think beauty
Sorry, that's
standards are different than in traditional Europe, right? What attracts you and what you find attractive obviously changes from culture to culture. Now, Dubai is a very international place as well. what we see in the clinic are international travelers, people that are having work assignments in the country, which we usually attract to our clinic, because they know that we aim for natural and something that is refreshing rather than altering and changing. But others opt for other clinics that offer really very, very traditional outlook what beautiful means in Middle East.
I suppose the world is shifting there, we're all sort of morphing and it's all becoming very cosmopolitan, these sort of key capital cities now.
And that goes back to individuality, doesn't it? So as the world blends and as those borders blur, and it's almost as though we've seen aesthetic ideals come towards a midline where there's this kind of Instagram face phenomenon, but it doesn't occur in natural biology. But then, thankfully, there's now more of a celebration of individuality.
It's so important, isn't it? Because the last thing we want to do is create that sort of homogenous aesthetic where everybody looks the same. So much of what we do, I think, in this field is about respecting individual attributes and ethnicities and sort of personalities. Is there a question? Yes, lady there.
I do have a question. I'm just trying to formulate the question because it's really big. But my question is, thank you so much because, you cover so many different aspects. My question is for Ida, mostly because you kind of mentioned something which I think the trend and then self-esteem and that's what's going on in our society, and I've seen in my line of work as well, with different generations, and this trend is really kind of scares me, and I think it's quite tragic in a way. So, and you did mention in a way a form of conversation and dialogue and interview with the client, but what's the future? I personally, I'll be quite honest with you, I've never thought that would happen to me, but I do struggle. I've started my struggle with accepting aging as a fact. I've never thought that would happen to me because it's that wasn't my personality. So aging again, like I said, accepting myself, and that's what self-esteem comes from the world, but I'm trying to kind of transfer and translate onto a younger generation because they are at the stage where I am at. They're there already. They have this struggle. They can't accept for what they are. So what is the future? I mean, kind of what else are you doing? What else kind of other strategies?
It's a complex question. I agree with you. It's there's no simple answer to it. My personal opinion is, data is clearly showing that unfortunately younger generations age faster because of all the inflammatory activities that are accelerating that aging process. So I think that's also generating the need to look into solutions for it earlier than maybe when I was 25. Now, down the line at the same time, what bothers me personally a lot is that once we start losing hair or we have active acne, we go and see a doctor for a medical reason, and from a social perspective it's extremely okay. Once we start aging, we don't accept aging as a disease, and it belongs into aesthetic conversation and vanity rather than something that has to be addressed. I think that socially has to change going forward, because having a consultation why and how individually we age and what we can do to slow that down has a very important component in economy, in society, in a lifestyle, and overall individual happiness. So it shouldn't be labeled as something that we are ashamed of, but rather being part of a conversation that you continuously progress in educating and finding individual personal solutions, what works for you the most, the best, at variety of decades in between 20 to 105 or wherever we will finally land.
Lady in the front here.
It's the first question I've ever asked, so it takes me ages to formulate a question. I'm really intrigued by the point that you made around, was it after 2010, people are going to live to about 105 on average, right? So take even, I guess, everyone in the room, we're still going to live older than our generations before us. So do we not think, being the skin being one of the first indicators of, say, like health and, you know, how well you're living your life and the holistic balance that you're putting into your body as well as like what you might want it to look like, do we not think that like we go to the dentist or like we go to the chiropractor, or like it should be more like brought on earlier in our life and educated in a way that you know, you're going to have this body for a long time? And I'm in my 30s, so it's kind of interesting to think that in theory there's only 40% away from your life, but we're just getting into the aging process. It's like, well, there's still so much more to go, and what does that look like, and how do we care for it, and what is the future? The question, I'm probably going a bit far. There are many questions in here.
It's almost the point that we should start doing, like the pre-juvenation and when is too soon? Is that going to change? Is that going to get earlier, younger? I think you'll all have something to say on this.
But should it be baked in? So that's what I'm kind of saying. Should it be baked into like an early age and understand?
I think so. There are my team members sitting here at the back that you can talk to them later on. I keep on pushing the topic of face being a currency in our life. And I'm very convinced that in years ahead of us, it will come out as a topic everyone will actively discuss. It's going away a bit from what we are talking here, but for more than 20 years of my life, I was leading HR organizations. So talent review conversations was my daily job. And so many times I have heard, oh, that person is super skilled, so kind of ready for promotion, but he or she, doesn't matter, just entered 50, looks so tired. Do you think he or she will be successful in that next job? It's frightening, that our performance and success, despite the fact we have skills, is actually judged through our facial expression and how fresh we look like for the next chapter. So in a way, it turns into a currency for your promotion, for your next jobs, for the size of opportunities that we will be able to materialize. And if it starts from 30 and you need to work until 85, it will matter. So it will be part of the economic conversation that we will not be able to avoid.
Can I add something?
Please.
Can I add something?
What you just said, that cycle that was breaking out the skin's around, the skin's having like not a normal reaction, or you just think psychology. Then the psychology is very much then you're having this constant, but you're not aware of why and how. But you're not aware of why and how, because that kind of education. Exactly. It kind of feels sooner kind of born.
I want to add to what you said about currency, and we're talking about getting a job. This might be a little bit perverse, I don't know how you take it, but as a doctor we often get taught to do an examination, and part of that examination is a general inspection. What that basically means, you look at the end of the bed and you look at the person at the end of the bed, and that's supposed to tell us a lot about the person. And one of the things that we get taught is look how they present themselves. This kind of tells you a little bit about their fitness, what they might be able to cope with in terms of their treatment. So sometimes you get patients who will not only look really tired, may look really aged, may have brittle nails, brittle hair. You think, oh gosh, this person is frail, they may not tolerate the hospital stay very well, the interventions very well. You also get patients, and let's talk about elderly patients that we get, who have their nails done, their hair done, who've also got family around them, and they're sitting upright, and they're wearing nice clothes, and you think, we've got to do absolutely everything for this person. We need to get them back out of the hospital so that they can carry on their normal lives. They must have less comorbidities. And so it's a really perverse way of saying of currency for a job. This is also a currency for how you're going to be treated within a hospital setting if you're unwell. And I think while that's
fascinating, those subliminal cues that our appearance, our demeanour, our posture, how we hold ourselves, all of that actually builds up into such a colourful picture, which tells us so much about the human being in front of us. I'm sure you have something to add.
Oh my goodness, I have to stop this. I'm going to go down the whole rabbit hole that you'll be thinking, why did I get my goodie bag? Why is she in the field that she's in? I think, wouldn't it be wonderful if we lived in an idealistic society where people could age and be allowed to age and be empowered to age, right? And still be valued for that, that it's not a full-on currency, that people aren't judged by that. But the problem is that the anthropological elements of it is that humans do judge each other and they compete, and that the human may be driven to choose the younger aspect and the healthier aspect, etc. And I think it's really complicated. I think it's extremely complicated. And I think there needs to be more conversation around the acceptance of aging. And of course, I come from a standpoint of assessing the science. As I said, in the data that we produced, we saw that the doctors were wanting to treat the patients earlier than the patients were wanting to be treated. They were seeing these signs. So, absolutely to your point, they were wanting to rejuvenate their patients to support them now. So it's somehow, for me, some interesting combination of supporting the aging process from a health perspective, from a psychological perspective, from how somebody faces the world and can really believe in themselves, so that true holistic approach, but actually changing society, trying to inform society.
I agree. It seems like it's such a dichotomy. Aging, as you mentioned, I think is a disease. But to be very medical and to be very scientific about it, but also psychologically, we want to feel empowered to age, to grow old gracefully, and all of these mantras that are thrown around. And a lot of the time, we do find ourselves very caught in the middle of those two opposing ideas.
It's really difficult because if we just think of aging as a disease, then does that mean that everybody who is aging is sick? Difficult, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
100%. Are there any more questions? Yes, please.
We all talked about action in our skin. I appreciate when we're having a treatment, we might be really relaxed. But how do you treat it long term? So I know it's a bit of a loaded question. If somebody comes to you and say, I'm really stressed at work, I mean, obviously the great thing to do would be to retire, right? But we can't all do that. So what do you kind of advise in those situations?
To help someone get their stress under control.
Exactly, so that they can get their skin in the right place.
I love these loaded questions that are coming out. Do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, a really important question because it's about being realistic, isn't it? If we were to go and have a beautiful holiday and be in a beautiful, serene location, then that's wonderful and we all feel great. But it's about the day-to-day realism of how we're going to live. And for me, in my practice, I really encourage, as my fellow panelists will say, that real understanding of oneself I hold meditation classes within my practice. I also engage with different specialists who work on the nervous system. So I think nervous system dysregulation is something that, again, is gaining a lot of conversation, thankfully. People are living quick, they're living under a huge amount of pressure, and frankly, a lot of people have been living in survival mode for a long time. And I think it takes quite a big step for someone to really, in their body, feel the difference between that sympathetic, low-grade, constant stress to either what we call dorsal vagal dysregulation shutdown, where you're completely exhausted and you don't want to leave the house. There's something that's very, very different that sits not within those realms. And it's something where people can feel healthier, but it does take different combination techniques. So I think that is something to watch, and I'm very excited about really supporting patients with their nervous systems.
I think the consistency as well, exactly to your point at the beginning where you said we could all go on holiday and that's great for the week that you're on holiday, and then you come back to 1,000 emails in your inbox and suddenly you've completely forgotten about that nice week on the beach. We have to chip away almost at it every single day, don't we, to integrate these mindfulness practices, whatever sort of support networks we're having in place. They need to be there on a consistent, regular basis to actually have a long-term effect. Okay, what did you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think stress is a really interesting topic to talk about. First of all, what is stress, and what does everybody interpret by that? And there's good and there's bad stress, and I mentioned that a little bit. If I take a very medical approach to this, we would be looking at modifiable risk factors and modifiable things that we can actually take away. So if you're in a job that's causing you a lot of stress, or you've got kids that are causing you a lot of stress, it can be really hard to modify those factors because they're part of your life. But what are the other aspects which can be modified, such as your lifestyle in the form of whether it's your diet and how happy your microbiome is, for example, or if you're turning to alcohol to reduce your stress levels in the evening because it helps you feel a little bit calmer. Remember that alcohol is also a toxin, and that's probably contributing to stresses that actually could be better off without. So definitely as a clinician, I'd be assessing the modifier risk factors. Which are those that we can actually take away completely? And then, as you mentioned, with the nervous system and looking at the person as a whole and seeing how we can activate our own repair mechanisms, our vagal nervous system, and looking into that a bit more detail. So I think there's two aspects to it. How can we build your resilience through meditation, but how can we also prevent the risk factors that you've already got in place?
I think it's a good point. We're never going to entirely eliminate stress, so actually what can we supplement almost to bring the body back into balance?
Yeah, I think a couple of points already. Dealing with stress for me personally, the way to resolve it, it's deep introspection and self-awareness, because different groups of people or personality archetypes have different triggers what stress actually boosts up. For me personally, I overwork myself, that's my daily pattern, and I've realized that my weekend is having my Saturday morning with my coffee, with something to read, and just kind of refocus back again. It's what calibrates me and what brings me back to normal levels. I am also a thinker, so I see threats more than average population in everything. I also know that going into situations that stress me out, I avoid doing in early mornings where cortisol level naturally in my body is high. So there are small tips and tricks you can define in yourself what for you actually is spiking the stress level, and then what brings it down, and try to balance it out through the week as much as you individually can.
Yeah, it all comes back to that sort of self-awareness, doesn't it? And understanding your body and your mind a little bit more. Okay, I've had the sign for no more questions, but I'm sure the speakers will be around for a little longer if there are any more loaded questions, because they can be here for you. But a huge thank you, first and foremost, to our amazing beauty triangle for being so insightful and inspiring. And thank you to all of you for coming tonight as well. It's amazing to have so many of you here, and thank you for the amazing questions and for being such a well-behaved audience. Don't forget your goodie bags on the way out. Referral cards will be here for those. And thank you for coming. I hope to see you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.